Welcome everyone to this board meeting on June 27th, SPJ. Let's start as we always do with a roll call of the board members. Rebecca, would you read the roll call?
Audie.
Yes.
Join the meeting.
Patty Newberry.
Here.
Matt Hall. Rebecca Aguilar. Here. Lauren Bartlett.
Here.
Yvette Walker.
Here.
Mike Riley.
Here.
Erica Carvajal. Taylor Murphy-Dermsky. And Tess Fox.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Andy Schatz, who often joins us, is not available today. And so we do not have a parliamentarian. And I'd ask board members to assist me if I skip any of the usual niceties of Robert's Rules of Order. Let us start first by considering the minutes from the last meeting, April 18 board meeting. Is there a motion to consider the minutes?
So moved.
That was Yvette. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
And thank you, Rebecca. Is there discussion about the minutes? I have one small typo that I discerned. A stray number 4 is on the 3rd page of the minutes, and I can send that to Jennifer to clean up, but I saw nothing else. I would ask, however, that there be an inclusion of the new chapters that we approved at that meeting, just for the record, so we get those names in the minutes. If we have no further questions, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
We already have the motion on the table, Patty.
Thank you. The motion is on the table. Seeing no additional discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any objections, say nay. Any abstentions? The minutes are approved. All right, and we're welcoming Matt Hall and Taylor, who are with us as well. And sorry we started without you guys. So let's start with the President's report. You have, I hope, had a chance to look at that. I just want to start by saying it's been a very busy couple of months since we've been together, even though we've had conversations via email and so forth. And so I really want to thank board members and thank the staff for a lot of great activity in the last couple of months to address pressing issues. I think we've had a very productive couple of months despite all the obvious disruptions. And I was very excited, very buoyed to read the committee reports, the community reports, the proposals from members. So even in a pandemic, even in the midst of racial unrest in our country, SPJ is staying active and staying relevant and staying at the front of important conversations. So I thank everybody for great energy and great focus on SPJ priorities at this time. So the big news of the day, of course, is that we are pivoting to a virtual conference, and we have time in the meeting scheduled to talk about what I'm now calling the non-EIJ 20, because we don't have a new name yet, but we'll cover that when we get to that. But I'm very excited that we decided to go forward with that. And we'll outline what plans exist at this time and invite lots of ideas. I'll just hit a couple of things that I mentioned in my letter that I think are important to draw attention to. Beyond that, we'll be announcing the fellows of the society probably in the coming week. I'm super excited about the people that we selected with the help of our great awards and awards committee. And I think the membership will be excited about that as well. If you had time to read some of the documents for today's meeting, we have an optimistic outlook on the financial front, meaning we're spending less money because we're all in lockdown, and we're doing okay on some revenue fronts. So that's good news given our last conversation about an operating deficit. You see in my report, and I'm sure John will talk about this as well, that we are moving forward to hire a director of education. And so we're very grateful that the foundation was able to grant the SPJ side funds to make that happen, and John can fill us in on where he stands on that. I'm excited too that since we've been together, we gave out $40,000 to help journalists in need. That was 141 grants of up to $500 each. These are grants that don't have to be paid back. That made a real difference for short-term needs for some of our members. One or two more things. I think we've done well in responding to the crises of the moment. We've put a lot of really helpful resources in front of members to cover COVID, to cover protests. We've spoken out, we've joined statements, we created our own statements on those two topics. We've given a lot of interviews, we've done a lot of original programming around both of those, and we're continuing to do those as we move forward. And with that, I thank everyone for being here, and I'll turn it over to John Schertzer, Executive Director, for comments on his report.
Thank you, Patty. Just a note that we're getting a pretty bad thunderstorm here right now at the office, so if I sound like the Count from Sesame Street and I say something and the walls start shaking, that's part of the reason why. My report is in the packet, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of things, as Patty mentioned. It's been a very busy few months since we last convened. You know, if there's any microcosm of that, would have been yesterday. You know, in one day we shared our award winners for SDX with a virtual presentation. We promoted that then through social media and a press release. At the same time, we shared information on changes to EIJ. At the same time, we pushed that out with a press release and a social media strategy and so on and so forth. It sort of has felt like every day has felt like that, simply because of all the things that are going on. But I feel, as Patty said, that pretty satisfied with how we've handled most things, and we've learned a lot along the way. Just an update on the Director of Education role. Since that was mentioned, we had over 60 applicants for that role, very qualified applicants, very interesting and compelling candidates for that. So what I did was send a questionnaire to a select number of those who I think I'd like to follow up with. And then next week we'll do a next round where we do some phone conversations, and then we'll get serious about interviewing. I do think that August 1 might be a realistic time frame by which somebody's actually in that position and doing the work for the organization. So, but I feel good about the candidates we have. I think the right person's in that group. So I feel good about that. Patty mentioned EIJ. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but we'll highlight in the report that we did submit a letter to the Washington Hilton that we wish to cancel EIJ, or actually are canceling EIJ, enacting force majeure in our contract. No response yet from the Hilton, and so we're just waiting to see if a response comes and what that looks like. But that was certainly something we had to collaborate quickly with RTD&A to do. And then I just will make a small note that we are talking to a couple of other organizations. I won't share any more about who they are, but we'd love to get a couple of more organizations that would take advantage of our association management work. And I think I feel good about some options and opportunities there. So you'll hear a lot from me later on with the strategic planning report. And so maybe I'll save most of the other conversation for that time, but I'll entertain any questions, of course, that you have on the report.
Great. Any questions for John about any of the comments he just made or anything in his written report? All right, super. So let's move to the big topic, EIJ, not EIJ 2020. This is the culmination. Yesterday's announcement that we're moving to a digital conference is a culmination of many weeks of talks with our longtime partner, RTD&A. We've been hosting a conference with them and sometimes with other groups since 2011. That is essentially coming to an end with a move to a virtual conference. And as John said, the big piece that's unknown right now is the outcome of our contract with the Hilton folks, but we hope that that can end well. So with the move to a virtual, I'll just outline what the board has been thinking about This is not set in concrete. This is still a very live conversation, and we are happy to have members here on the call today to offer their thoughts on what would be a suitable, attractive conference, what would make you sign up. So at present, we're thinking a 2-day structure. The 2 days would be roughly 5 hours each. We'd like to have a strong focus on our fellows because we have these terrific 5 fellows that we're about to announce. All have agreed to participate in something. They're, staying tuned, waiting for our ask, essentially. We also have many, many programs from which to pitch, or to pull, that were already selected pre-COVID-19, right? So everyone on this call probably knows the usual way we do our conferences, that folks submit their proposals, a committee selects proposals, gets back to everybody, and then we start to construct the programming. That took a giant pause. And so what's going to happen in the coming week, really, because that's how quickly we have to move. The programming committee will have a meeting. Did we select that for Thursday? I can't remember if we selected a date yet. Yeah,
Yes,
for Thursday. So we already have that on our calendars. The programming committee will now essentially become the conference committee, and we'll work with John and other folks at headquarters on putting this together. We already have a bunch of programs that we picked. Now we have to return to that list and determine what is what's doable in a virtual setting, how much is too much, how much is just right, and how have the topics that we preferenced back in March changed, right? Since the world has changed, right? So we have a lot of decisions to make quickly. Among them is the price point, right? We've been all over the place in our consideration of what kind of price would be attractive to people. Everything from 0 on up to, well, at one point 150 was floated, and nobody on this board liked that number at all. So we have to think about that aspect. Anyway, there's a lot of things to talk about here, and probably best to let members of the board chime in with questions or comments at this point about the decision of announced yesterday. There are some ideas in the chat field. Anybody want to open their, board members want to open their microphones and comment on anything?
Many of us are talking about, and in fact, I don't think I've actually hit enter, so mine hasn't appeared yet. Talking about encouraging ideas from members. I know we have some great ideas that we can select from. The world has changed quite a bit. So we would really like to hear ideas for speakers and panels that members would be interested in coming, seeing, watching, and what would be most relevant to this kind of virtual conference.
I think that's a good idea. We can, if you want to put in the chat field topics, those of you who are not on the board, what topics would make you show up for a virtual conference? That would be one way we can go here. Rebecca, I saw Rebecca's hand, but I saw Lauren first. So it goes Lauren and then Rebecca, please.
Thanks, Patty. I'd like to echo what Yvette said. To me, there's 2 issues. It's what kind of programming are people interested in? Who would they like to see be a part of these panels? Because it's virtually, in some ways we have access to people we might not otherwise have had access to. And then I think the other issue is how much, what is the right balance? We're looking at primarily doing this on a Saturday. What do you think is the right number of programs? What do you think is a good mix of a keynote speaker versus training versus discussions on topical issues? What is it that you would like to see that members in your chapters and regions would like to see, would really like to hear everybody's input?
Very good.
And also, oh, I'm sorry, one last thing, cost. We have gone from everything to no cost to a relatively low cost. And I think the one thing that we were all in agreement on is that there would be if there's a cost, a higher cost for non-members.
Thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca, you're muted.
Thank you, Patty. I think one of the key discussions definitely that should be front and center is about diversity, inclusion, systemic racism. And I would like the ideas from our members, what they would like to discuss. I know that sometimes topics can be very sensitive. And I also know that, there's a lot of webinars and Zooms going on right now and pertaining to this issue. And more important, I think that we hear from the membership because, we don't want to be repetitive. On the other hand, as one white journalist told me, we don't want to pound, especially white people in the head with, okay, do you get it or don't you get it? And so, I'm very aware of that. And I'm very aware of the discussions we need. So I would really like input from the membership of what discussions do you want? Because, we don't want to repeat ourselves. And I know there's other discussions going on out there, but it is very key and it is very front and center right now. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. Other board members want to pipe in? I'm seeing lots of good comments here, so I'll just comment on a few things. Yes, diversity, inclusion, racism, freelancing. I think those are topics that have great appeal and a great audience. I would like to comment on the DC chapter. We definitely want to continue talking with the DC chapter. And of course, we're very disappointed we can't be in person in DC and do a lot of the great added value kinds of activities that the DC folks had thought up. And so I had a nice conversation with Randy and Deanne last week. Deanne will remain on the programming committee and we'll do what we can to preserve any of the original ideas. So it's a live conversation, folks, and that's why we're inviting you back to the conversation. From my point of view, there are three topics that are relevant right now: pandemic, protests, and politics. And I don't know if we can do something jazzy with 3 Ps in terms of the name of the conference or the focus of the conference, but those seem to me to be pretty much the top topics of the moment. Other thoughts, board members, international community? Thank you, Elle, for that. Freelance, yes.
One thought that I have is I'd like to hear from the members on whether they want to see a program that strictly focuses on the topics or if they're still interested in some kind of skills training on different, we often have, it's different than a hands-on workshop, but the skills that they need to do their jobs if they want to see that kind of programming.
Very good. So there's a couple ways we could go. We could ask members to chime in right now, open up the mic and kind of jump ahead to public comment. Or I don't know if there's any appetite, board members, for some kind of quick turnaround SurveyMonkey kind of tool to collect the data that we were asking for, i.e. topics, price, workshops versus presentations. John, would you assist here? We haven't done that specifically, have we, since we've been considering the move to virtual?
No, we have not surveyed on topics or things of that nature, no.
Yeah. Board members, do you think that would be helpful? Matt Hall.
Yeah, I think we definitely should survey our members on just a handful of questions. We don't want to deluge them at this time, but I think we need to get a much better sense of the price point. So I'm hoping members here on this call can, even if it's just in the chat field, let us know how much they would pay, if they would pay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think figuring out where that price point is super important. I also think, as kind of mirroring what others have said here, the mix of what we're getting involved in, whether it's panels or discussions, I think is important. By September, we'll probably all have cumulatively been on Zoom kind of millions of hours doing many of these things that we're going to be doing. But I also agree that this is the time for us to get some speakers of high profile at a moment when we all want to hear from them and about them. And so the subjects, the The speakers and the costs, I think, are what we should kind of drill down and figure out what people want to get.
As just a quick sample, those of you who are not on the board, who are on the call, if you would put in the chat what you think you would pay for a 2-day conference. Day 1 focused on journalism, day 2 focused on SPJ matters is the rough outline that we're considering. Would you pay? Just put a figure in there. I saw Rebecca's hand and then Lauren's hand.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just wondering, and going off with what Matt said, is there a way, and again, maybe a quick like survey that we can send out to our members? I mean, you know, Survey Monkey, whatever, a quick survey so they can give us our feedback. And at least, you know, aside from the people that joined us today, which is fantastic, the people who are, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people out there working right now, just to grasp an idea on a price and maybe some top 3 panels they want. Because I'm seeing in the chat, I mean, the panels all are, you know, all over the place, which are really solid ones, from training to freelancing to diversity. I think now's the time to really get the voice of our membership if we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren.
So I agree with Matt and Rebecca. I think we definitely should survey our members, but we also should take advantage of hearing right now from our members who are joining the board meeting today. They are current or former chapter leaders, national committee chairs, people who are very interested in SPJ and a successful conference. So I would love to, if it's possible, Patty, to move the public comment so that people can share their ideas. I think it would be very valuable for everybody here to hear that.
I am happy to do that. So let's go ahead. If you are a non-board member and you'd like to speak to the conference at this time, we'll just restrict comments to the conference at the moment. So anybody want to make a comment, please show your hand, and I'll try to go back and forth on the screen here. I saw Bob Becker first, and then I saw Hazel Becker. So Bob, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi there. Yeah, I think we should do as much as we can as stuff for everybody and not say have a day for SPJ stuff. The committees can meet independently of this. So to the extent that you want to have a business meeting, if you want to have a business meeting, let's keep that limited to a couple of hours, and let's focus on stuff for everybody for as much of the time as we can.
Thank you. Hazel?
I think it's time to have the conversation in the journalism world about freelancers. I think that this conference gives us a good opportunity to address this topic that is, as far as I'm concerned, critical to the future of journalism. Too many freelancers ended up not even getting their unemployment. Some people that I know are on the verge of being kicked out of their apartments. A lot of this is happening because editors do what we in the freelance world and young people call ghosting. They take our work and publish it and then disappear. Some of these are very well-known and respectable publications. I don't necessarily think people are doing it intentionally, but I think what is happening to freelancers during the pandemic and the protests is an important issue, and I hope SPJ will take it up.
Thank you, Hazel. Another hand, I see Hillary, and then I see Andrew. Hillary Niles.
Unmute.
You're good. We can hear you.
Sorry about that. Thanks. And I would echo a couple comments that I'm seeing in the chat, and I think somebody else said, I would love to see 2 days of programming that is relevant to journalists and not consolidate all of the journalism skills and topical discussions into one day. I think that extending those over the course of 2 days would improve access to the sessions, and I think that would be preferable. And I would even be willing to, have 2 days devoted to relevant programming for doing our jobs, and then spend a couple hours on a third day to talk about more like SPJ issues, because I do get a lot of value from that at the EIJ. But I would want this enterprise to be focused on the journalism skills and the topical discussions, as Rebecca and Hazel mentioned.
Thank you for that. And Andrew Seaman.
Hi, everyone. So I think I agree. Don't have a day for SPJ stuff. No one's paying for that. Can't even give it away. But I think what I should echo is what Rebecca said earlier. I think something that could be really useful, and it gets to the heart of a community issue, but also a business issue, is to focus on what we could do about newsroom diversity. So, I think there is such a good business case that we can make, which is, what a lot of the newsroom leaders care about. But on top of that, it's how we serve our communities. So people aren't going to read, watch, or listen to what journalists produce if they don't see themselves in it. And I think there's a few newsrooms around the country who've done a good job at actually overhauling hiring practices, promotion practices, to make sure that their newsrooms are reflective of the communities that they serve. So I think giving them something that is a very quick, useful thing they could take back to their managers to say, this is what you should do and this is why you should do it, is crucial. And I think, focusing on protest over that is not necessarily a good idea. I think the focus should be on what we could actually do as a result of the protest and the outcry that we hear from people.
Gotcha. I saw Jonathan Make.
Yeah, hey, I just wanted to chime in very narrowly. I think that charging a fee, even if it's not high, often that makes people value the programming a little more, actually show up when they say they will, and having, of course, a differentiated fee for those who are members versus those who aren't, and maybe, not having fees or low fees for those who are out of work or in perilous financial situations. I like the 3 Ps, and thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. Let's see, let me go over back. Again, put your hand up or use the hand up icon. Not seeing any other. Lots of great lots of good input in the chat field. We'll capture all of that, and stay tuned as the conversation continues. Feel free to email me directly after the fact if you have particular things you'd like to add to the conversation. Again, the programming committee, the conference committee will reconvene on Thursday, and we'll get this party started. So really excited to make this happen. I think, I agree that we can get access to high-level people that maybe wouldn't have made a trip to an EIJ, but might be willing to give us an hour of their time in a virtual setting. All right, with that, we're going to move to the financial update. There was a memo from Jake Koenig in your packet, and board members, do we have Jake on the line, John, for any questions? Or
I have not seen him log in.
Okay. All right.
So, unless he's...
I would guess that you can handle any questions. Do we have questions about SPJ finances at this time? So I would like to highlight one aspect of Jake's report, which is when the Finance Committee can expect to see different financial reports, the quarterly reports, right? That's how the board monitors the financial health of the organization, is seeing and analyzing the quarterly reports. And so he's outlined a calendar here, which I think we can all live with, and that's great. But John and I had a conversation this week about the next year budget. So we're now, as a reminder, we're now in a calendar year fiscal year. We made that change in recent months, which I think is a great change. But when can the board expect to see the year ahead budget. So Jake's memo is saying that it would come when the Finance Committee sees the third quarter report. That would be roughly October 15. John, you and I talked yesterday about the new board, Matt's board, will be may need to have a meeting in November. So if the Finance Committee sees the year ahead budget on roughly October 15, then it's going to need action on the part of the full board. So just something to keep in mind for the coming year, Matt, in terms of the meetings that you want to schedule. One of them should coincide with the availability of the year ahead budget. Does that make sense to everyone? Right? I had thought maybe we would have the year ahead budget in September for the board, for the current board, but the timing is such that really the third quarter should be behind us to allow for the best year ahead budget possible, right? So we are all, of course, hoping to be back in the black sooner rather than later. And that, of course, is the goal at headquarters. Any questions? All right, seeing none. Let's move next to back to John. John is going to take the screen here and share with us some strategic planning slides. So just let me set this up. We have had a strategic planning task force for about a year and a half. Matt took it over in September of last year. We made some good progress, but then when the pandemic struck, we took a pause, and now we are restarting the process. So what John has put together here, I'm letting in Bob Shapiro from New Jersey. What John has put together here is not just a short-term strategic plan. It's really a reflection of his 6 months with us and his perceptions of where we are and where we can go from this point forward. It's informed by what we've done so far in terms of the strategic plan process. And the intent here is to allow us to think big and then to take his thoughts here back to the strategic planning task force and end up with a document in September that we can call next year's strategic plan, right? Because we can't just continue to deliberate forever. We need to put something on paper that allows us to take the next logical steps in the journey of SPJ. And with that, I'll turn it over to John.
Thanks, Patty. Patty, can you see my screen just as a test?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I want to share with you some slides, and I'm going to invite you in the midst of this very tactical board meeting to sit back and take a breath and just sort of think big for a few minutes, because that's what strategic planning requires. And so I want to share with you some ideas that I find exciting. I think they're a start. I'm not saying that any of these ideas are what we have to go with. And of course, I can't make that determination anyhow. So all I'm saying is, let's give these thoughts some time to think, to breathe, and for us to get a chance to really think about them. I tend to view this as setting a strategic direction. In our current world that we live in, it is very hard, I believe, for an organization to set a strategic plan that is 3 to 5 years in length and think it's going to survive even 1 year, simply because things are changing so rapidly. So the way I see us going forward, or would like us to, is for the board to think through and set a strategic direction, and then annually approve a plan that coincides with that strategic direction. Noting that we need to be nimble and versatile in what the environment is telling us and the landscape is telling us is important at that time. So I want to share with you a few different ideas and thoughts that might get us to that place. And I would love for commentary and thoughts after we get through this. And so to kind of see where, if you feel like we're heading down the right pathway here. Some guiding thoughts, things that I think are very important for organizations to consider. A good old country saying, if you chase 2 rabbits, you catch neither. And I do think this organization, from my perspective, in the last 6 months has tried to chase about 25 different rabbits. And so one of the problems that we face as an organization is we aren't often disciplined to a strategy or a direction. We react. And so we see something happening over here and we feel we also must do that, or we feel the news of the day drives us to do one thing where maybe if we had stopped and thought, we would have done something different. So by the end of this presentation, what I'm encouraging us to do is to really be disciplined to a few things that we think we can do really well. And then of course, the Albert Einstein quote, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. What you'll see here in the end and is very familiar stuff. At the same time, we also need to recognize that we can't hold so fast and tightly to traditions that may hinder where we're trying to go. So let's keep that in mind and really try to be strategic. So I used a lot of tools when I go through a strategic thinking exercise, and I'm going to kind of unveil to you some of those tools that I've used and some of the things I've thought about as I went through this thinking. The first tool, and one that a lot of organizations like to use, is simply to draw a metaphor or an analogy and then see what thinking that might produce. So I'm missing
Hey, John, you froze.
baseball big time right now.
Uh-oh. John, are you still with us? Maybe he's rebooting.
They do have.
Okay, so.
John? Yeah. Bad weather there, maybe. I think he's off, and we'll see if we can get him back on.
There is a storm coming through Indy. We had a big bang of thunder a few minutes ago, so.
Okay. Jennifer, are you in the offices?
No, I'm at home.
Okay.
I've texted John though and told him
Okay.
that we completely lost him.
Yep, thank you. This is going to be a short meeting if we don't have his presentation.
But he really got us all to just kind of sit back and be quiet and listen to him.
Now everybody's on pins and needles. What is this presentation about? So I'll just address a couple things in the chat field while we have a minute here. Elle is asking, when do we have an idea about EIJ programming, a deadline? I think we'll set those deadlines this week, Elle, because we've got to get the information online. We have to set an early bird deadline, right? So fast, when will you hear? Fast? That's not a very good response, but that's most of what I know. John, are you back with us?
I hope so.
Okay,
hi, everybody.
There you are. So maybe when you go back to the, turn off your own video when you share the screen. Thanks. All right.
I'll try that. And again, we're getting bad weather here. I may be playing a role too. So
yeah,
all right.
No worries. Okay.
Let's go back and try that again.
Thank you.
All right, so I think I left off with this sort of analogy to Major League Baseball. In a sense, I feel SPJ is sort of like that. In a sense, we prepare the field of play for journalism. So we make the environment one that's conducive for journalism, advocacy, First Amendment issues, public trust. What we try to do is create a field and an environment in which the field can be successful. Like Major League Baseball, we establish the rules and norms. We sort of say, you know, here's a way you can play the game and play it effectively through our ethics programs. We teach those rules, norms, and practices then too, like coaching happens in Major League Baseball. But the biggest thing I've pulled out of this analogy is that Major League Baseball is more successful if tomorrow one more person loves the game of baseball than they. And so I think that's something we can really pull, is to say, how do we help this industry we love and help journalists within it fall in love with their vocation over and over again? just like Major League Baseball tries to instill that love from the get-go so that more people are fans of it when it comes. So that's one tool, is to use an analogy. So that's just an example. But as I was thinking about Major League Baseball, I was also thinking about, what about other associations we're familiar with? And staff helped me think through this a little bit too, is that there are associations we equate to causes pretty quickly and off the bat. So for example, you're thinking about the cause of the environment. The Sierra Club is a common one you think about. Second Amendment, NRA, business, Chamber of Commerce, diversity issues, NAACP, so on and so forth. So I decided that I took a look at these top of mind associations, and I did as an exercise, an exploration of their websites, simply to see what are they talking about, what are they thinking about, because what if we strove to be top of mind when people think of journalism? Oh, that's SPJ. And what could we learn from these associations so that we could maybe get to that place? Some of the common themes that I found as I reviewed their websites, and it's simply looking at their website, so there's a lot more than that, right? But at least it's how they present themselves, is that these organizations that are top of mind associations use aggressive advocacy in their language, words like defend, advance, attack, so on and so forth. They use messaging that blends vision with a feeling there's urgency. If there's no reason, you can't wait. You've got to get engaged and you've got to get involved now. They lead with take action. So they don't necessarily lead with join, but they lead with take action. That could be joining. It could also be donating. It could also be being a part of a committee. It could be signing on to legislation, so on and so forth. I studied AAA and AA or AARP. They're a little different. They're very transactional organizations. You join and you get instant benefits and services. So we could study those a little bit more as far as how do they provide benefits, and then how might we do that? But other than those couple organizations, most treat membership as a secondary factor, instead focusing more on donations or other ways to get involved. The website focuses on the issue or the cause, not necessarily what it means to be a member, but rather the cause in general. And there's also a heavy focus on legislation with these organizations. So the learning I got out of this tool, which was studying other top of mind associations, was this question of, how can SPJ be more cause driven? Causes attract supporters, it attracts funders, it attracts attention. When you're only seen as an organization that focuses only on what internally people want, then people give you license to just go be that internally focused organization, versus if you are able to convey that you're championing a cause, you can build a lot of fans and support that way. So how can we be more cause driven? So that's a tool and a thought to consider. Another tool was this Venn diagram I developed thinking about our past, present, and future. So what is our history and our legacy? What's in our DNA as an organization? And then what are we good at? What are our bright spots? What are the things really shining on us right now? And then what does the industry need? What does journalism really need in this moment? And can we find that middle zone of this diagram that says all three of those things meet and all three of those things matter? And then let's live there. Let's find a way to operate in that space. We did an exercise as a staff in which we investigated each of these questions, and we tried to build themes among these three questions. And really what came from it was, if we were to operate in that middle zone of that diagram, some of these things would pop out. A focus on collegiate and younger emerging journalists, ethics and professionalism as a core, advocacy for the profession, instilling pride, networking, membership, subgroups like chapters or communities, and an ability to bring people together around a smaller idea within the larger umbrella, and awarding best practices, providing education and training. So I took those elements, and those are all going to be part of the big mix of what I think we can be and where we can go. So another tool was that Venn diagram. And then the last tool, well, not the last, but probably the most elaborate, and I will move through this relatively quickly, is this idea of what is called the Macmillan Matrix. And I'm going to put this up on the screen, but trust me, I'm not going to get too in depth with this because it can get a little convoluted. But this is a tool I've used for strategic planning in the past that basically analyzes for an organization what programs should you really emphasize and address more fully, and which ones might you want to let go of or go pass on to someone else to take care of. As I said, this organization does a lot of things. So we need to ask ourselves, if we want to do more of something, then what should we do less of in order to make room for that? And I asked many of you on this call and on the board and staff to complete a survey or a questionnaire that basically investigated the questions that are embedded in this diagram. You know, how often do other organizations do these things? What is our competitive position? How attractive or much energy do we draw from doing that particular program? So what you do is you take the inputs, and I took the survey inputs, and you place it into this grid, and you can see there's a number 1 through 10. It basically would put a program into a box and would tell you exactly what you ought to do with that program. So let me share with you sort of what the results showed us when we did that survey and what came out of that in terms of how this matrix would tell us what we should do with these programs. The first category that we had a lot of programs fall into is what's called aggressive competition. These are programs that are highly attractive, meaning people really enjoy and like these programs within the organization. We have a strong competitive position, meaning we're doing these fairly well at the time and can do better, and many others are doing it. So we got to keep in mind there's others out there doing these things. When we put in the data, these programs or things we do fell into this category. So what it's saying is that we ought to take these things and continue doing them, be prepared to compete perhaps with other organizations also doing them, but just try to do it even more strongly than we're doing it today. So aggressively compete in these places. So First Amendment work, awards, our annual convention or training, in-person training program, membership. So the fact that we have a membership and what we do with it. And then educational programs that can run the gamut from webinars to all sorts of creative ways to present information. The second category we had a lot of things fall into was aggressive growth. These are also attractive programs. We have a strong competitive position in these, but not many others are doing it. So what that says is we ought to really ramp up our efforts here to fill the need that exists out there. And these programs fell into that category after we did the survey. Our Code of Ethics and related programs, our Legal Defense Fund, our Google and Facebook tools training for journalists, and our SPJ Communities programs. So what this is really telling us is the things you see on this screen, if we were to use this matrix and this system, this ought to be the programs we really focus on aggressively and really try to grow and expand what we do here. Some other programs fell into other categories. So there's a category on this grid called Soul of the Organization, which is kind of a clever way it basically says that this program is so richly a part of who you are as an organization that you ought to work hard to keep doing it and to do it better, even though some factors exist, like it may not be an easy program to pull off and not many others are doing it. We had one program in the survey fall here, and that was our College Chapter program. So what this essentially says is that what we ought to do here is emphasize this program and grow it to be even stronger because it's almost an embedded part of who we are. And when you think about how we were founded, it's clear to see that that's true. The last category we had programs fall into is what the grid calls foreign aid or joint venture, which basically says that you would collaborate with others to share the load on these, or you would simply give them away, that they're not something that you should really internally put a lot of time and energy and resources into. So this is what the survey showed, is that these few things fell into this category. Our professional chapter program, our regional conferences, and our regions. Now, not to induce panic to anyone that likes these things, and I feel these things are very important to the organization as constituted. What it's saying is that there might be, and it ought to be, a different way you approach how we handle these things. That these things, it's time to take a clear look with a different set of eyes and say, if we want these things to exist, maybe we need to do them differently than the way we've been doing them. Maybe we need to find a way to really focus on these in a different setting. So I will say in honesty, the regions and how we divide up the regions came through as the one program on that survey that could have potentially fallen into the divestment categories, meaning like we need to do away with it. I'd use this as a tool to spark conversation, not as a tool to tell us exactly what we should do. So what I think we ought to do going forward in the next round of this exploration is think through at least these three things about what we might want to do next in these categories. Because they don't seem, in most people's minds, who completed the survey, to be the things we ought to be spending the most time and attention on. So that was a lot there, and but I hope you see some of the tools that I use there to think through some of where we go. The last tool I'll highlight is our mission. This has to be added into the mix. Our mission is, I think, a very strong and compelling mission. It's a little lengthy for a mission statement. It kind of is a combination of mission, vision, and values all put into one. But that's not the worst thing ever, and it does really showcase what we're trying to achieve. And so I think it's important that this be in the mix as well. The words here, the sentiment here. And I do want to point out, in our current environment and climate we're in, and where we ought to think about where we go forward, we have a very powerful line or statement right here in our mission statement that says we encourage diversity in journalism. We put that word diversity and that emphasis on diversity in our seminal statement. An organization's mission is the thing that it should hold most cherished and most important. And we have this statement in there. So to me, that says we ought to be thinking about diversity in everything we do. It ought to be a part of all that we try to achieve because it's right there in our mission statement. So same with some of these other elements of our mission statement, but I wanted to particularly point that out. So the Strategic Planning Task Force identified these 5 pillars as a way to focus on where we go. And I think that this definitely needs to be added in as well. And it's not so different from some of the things we already discussed and shared. And so we definitely have to keep these in mind as well. And the only thing maybe that hasn't been mentioned previously is this financial growth and stability element, which is important for the internal functioning of an organization like ours and can't be ignored. But I think that comes through, as you'll see, in some of how we might carry out some of the strategies we try to employ. So that was a lot of information. I would much rather have presented that to you in person with a back and forth and a conversation, and maybe someday we will, but I put all of that into the mixing bowl, right? So that's all that study, all that thinking, all that good work brought forward by previous, by you all, by others, put it all in the mixing bowl and see what we get. Well, after I put it in the mixing bowl, my own thinking, these words just keep coming out to me and popping out to me. And so that's what I'll share with you. And I don't want this to become or look like a slogan per se, but I want it to be something to think about. Is this something we could be, and how do we get there? And to me, the words that popped out quite a bit was that SPJ is the champion for ethical journalism. The Society of Professional Journalism is the nation's longest serving supporter, defender, and advocate for ethical journalism. That's what a lot of what I read and studied tells me, and I've observed, tells me this organization is striving to be, historically has been and is attempted to be, and it is exactly, I think, what it could continue to strive to be to serve the industry we're in. One other way to look at this is sort of as a vision statement, is we envision a nation that believes in a free press and the value of journalism as strongly as we do. If we were to get to this place, say 10 years from now, if we were able to study this question now and 10 years from now, and we saw a movement and in this category that more people believed in journalism or the value of it, more people believe in a free press 10 years from now because of what SPJ did, I'd say we'd all agree we did a pretty good job then as an organization. And so thinking through, how do we be a champion for ethical journalism? How do we get a nation that believes in a free press and the value of journalism as strongly as we do? One way to look at this would be the big three, I call it. So I said you shouldn't chase 2 rabbits, but I'm actually encouraging us to chase 3, although be disciplined to how we get at these 3. We are champions for journalists, we are fighters for the First Amendment, and we are stewards for ethical journalism. As a concept, as a way to think about what we might be going forward. If we were to dive into these a little bit further, and this is just the start, and it needs a lot more thinking, but what does it mean to be a champion for journalists? Well, it means you recognize the achievements of journalists and their best practices through an awards program, which is already a highlight of what we do. It means we educate journalists on best practices and skills that will advance their careers. It means we want journalists to be better tomorrow than they are today at the work they do. It means we create products and services that help instill a pride of vocation in journalists at all stages of their career. And I have some tangible ideas on that, as well as what we could do to operate in that space. And I've highlighted one here because I think this it really matters, is that we unify the journalism community through our SPJ Communities program. I think our communities, our international community, our freelance community especially, have shown that when those groups can really come together and do work together, they can do phenomenal things. Some of our most successful training and education has come out of those 2 particular communities. What can we do more there? What if we are able to establish even more communities that serve the needs of what our membership wants and expands their ability to find affinity within the most broad-based organization? If we're fighters for the First Amendment, we monitor and fight against efforts to violate the First Amendment and suppress free press. And I think a strategy there is to think through a DC-based advocacy team, one that really focuses and hones in on this issue. And being located right in DC would obviously make a big difference, but it's someone who can keep their eye to this, or a team that keeps their eye to those issues. Our Legal Defense Fund and our First Amendment Forever Fund have a lot of places they can grow and expand and excel. And it showed through our surveys and through our thinking that those are areas where we ought to emphasize and aggressively grow. That would help us be a fighter for the First Amendment. And then our training and education programs could also encourage more success here as well if we've continued to provide training and education focused on those issues. And what if we were stewards for ethical journalism? What does that look like? Well, it means that we try to level that, or make a playing field that's stronger, like I had in the Major League Baseball example. And that means we help build public trust. We try to encourage greater accountability in the profession via an ethics response team, ethics hotline, and other programming. And we do that through an educational lens. It's not to be a punitive lens where we go looking for ethical violations, but it's where can we help the industry become stronger in their practice of ethics so that the public has a better understanding and appreciation for the role of journalism. It means we take our code of ethics and we maximize it. We strengthen it, we analyze it, we make it the strongest code out there and make it, one that's adopted and used everywhere. And then I feel like our youth and college programs, which I think ought to be emphasized and grown, can fit into this category because in a sense, we are preparing the next generation of ethical journalists. We're trying to flood the journalism field with the best and brightest and most ethical journalists it has ever seen. Every time we try to build and inspire a college chapter or a youth program, it means we're trying to make the industry that much better into the future. So if we were to, as a one-pager, do these things and do them well and do them strongly for the next, say, 5 years, and to see some impact from that, then my question would be for us all to think through, would that make SPJ a stronger organization, a more relevant organization, an organization that we can be proud of, and an organization that honors its history, but also realizes it needs to go forward into the future? That's, to me, it does, but I'm new, all right? So this is my 6 months in look at our organization, and I know this won't be the first or the last time we analyze where we might want to go forward. But just as an example of how, for instance, the diversity line in our mission statement and emphasis could be incorporated all throughout here. Diversity can play a big role in our awards programs and how we award the things we do, where we put the spotlight on best practices. Our education, it can fall well into that place as well. Our communities program, emphasizing, communities that focus on an underserved population within the journalism world. It can also show up in our code of ethics. We need to analyze our code of ethics for language and approaches that are making sure they are inclusive and do inspire diversity. So those are places where that can be embedded all throughout as well, as an example. So just 2 more slides, and then I promise you I'm done for now. But just as an example of why it's important to be disciplined to a few things. If we were to say that these are the 3 broad statements we want to focus on, it helps me structure our staff. It helps the organization structure its committee work. It tells us what we should be talking about at the National Convention very clearly. It tells us what we ought to be educating about, who we partner with, what our website looks like, and what it conveys. So that's what discipline to a few things versus several things can really help when it comes to the organization and its work. And then lastly, for the board to consider, the board's role, in my mind, when it comes to strategic direction setting, is annual affirmation that is the way we want to go. So annually taking a look at it and saying, yes, we're heading in the right path. Approving an annual plan and goals attached to a budget that says this was how this will get us to that plan or to those priorities. Monitoring progress and then oversight of the finances of the organization. So that's how discipline to a few different things can really help sharpen the board's work as well. So what I encourage as next steps is to enlist a strategic planning task force to explore this whole thing, and particularly maybe the big 3 and the goals within. build an annual plan based on this, and present it to the board at the same time the annual budget is presented. Begin a comprehensive study of organizational branding to make sure it aligns with what we're trying to be, and then find capacity building funding to finance what we want to do. It's to find those funders out there who can become big fans and supporters of this and will help fuel our implementation of this plan. There's a lot of questions that remain. What do we, how do we strengthen chapters, and how do we organize, what events should we try to continue to do or not do, and things like that. That still needs to come. But this, at least in my mind, is a sense of where I see the organization as a possible place to go. And I think our future is bright. And I really think as long as we can stay and find those things that we think we can be really good at and hone in on that, we'll have a very strong and compelling future as an organization. So again, not ideal to share that with you over Zoom and with a slide deck like this, but hoping that you kind of get a sense of where my thinking is at this point. And I will stop chatting at this point. And if anyone has, I guess, questions, or let Patty decide how we proceed based on our time.
Well, it is only 1 o'clock, and so we do have time for board members to weigh in here as we consider all this. First, I'll say thank you for the tremendous work of putting this together and helping crystallize our thinking and take us to the next step. I have questions, but I'm going to go first to Rebecca and then to Lauren, because of the first 2 hands that I saw.
First of all, John, thank you very much for the analysis. It was an excellent piece of work. This year I celebrate 39 years as a reporter, 39 years. And since 1981, I have been waiting, and many people of color, and also people of diverse backgrounds, whether you're gay, different religions, have been waiting for this words, diversity in journalism. It's interesting how it's such a big surprise. I've heard from many people say, oh my gosh, I didn't know Black people felt that way. Or, what about DACA? Or, what about LGBTQ? There's so many people, it's like, it's like sometimes even journalists, I ask, what, you grew up in a cave? So, I keep hearing, what are we doing about diversity? What are we doing about that? Let me just tell you, I've been waiting 39 years, and I'm 62 this year. 39 years for something like this to happen in journalism for us. I have lost jobs because I have fought for diversity in journalism. I have seen friends being taken out because suddenly the white people think, oh, she's a troublemaker. She's a feisty Latina. She's a militant Black woman. She's this or that. So I will tell you this, thank you so much. Because if it took the death of Mr. Floyd for this to happen in journalism, thank you so much. May he rest in peace. But I have been waiting for you, everybody, to include us in the conversation, not because it's trendy now, not because everybody's talking about it. Believe me, this is something that I have dealt with my entire life. I have been fired because I have brought up the issue that you're not hiring enough people of color. I have been, not only me, but many people. I have gay friends who I saw management systematically take them out the minute they realized they were a gay man. So I'm sorry I'm getting so emotional, but it's time. And I thank you that you're putting it in there. And I thank you, Patty, for you're right. And everything, protests, pandemic, and politics. Diversity is in there. DACA, Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ rights. 39 years I've waited for this. And it's sad that it took the death of Mr. Floyd for us to get to this point. So I'm sad and I'm happy at the same time. These are happy tears, but these are sad tears. Because you don't know what it's like. I can't take off this brown skin. I don't have white privilege, never had. So I appreciate you, John and Patty, and really all of you for allowing me to speak my truth. Thank you.
Thank you for that important testimonial, Rebecca. Lauren, next.
Thanks, Patty. Thank you, Rebecca. And I really want to thank John. That is one of the most thoughtful, comprehensive pieces I've ever seen out of headquarters. And I've been a member of this organization since I was 18 years old. I wanted to share a couple of thoughts and observations from the deck and thoughts that John shared. Diversity, advocacy, and ethics are the issues that this organization has held as pillars, but not, to Rebecca's point, necessarily acted on. There have been times over the years, especially when Sally Lehrman was very involved, she got a Wells Key for her work in diversity. That has fallen off. And I think that those definitely are the right ways to go, and we should continue and come up with new and different ways. I like a lot of the things you said, John, and of course, it will surprise nobody that I disagree with a couple of them. I think a focus on college chapters is very important, but we need to see it through and have them continue. And so I think an emphasis on college chapters along with professional chapters, they go hand in hand. And I know that we spend a lot of time trying to save dying chapters, and that's probably not the right focus of energy. But I think there are new and different ways that we can look at chapters and regions. And growing the communities is something that I support. And there had been efforts early on and there had been more communities that just didn't really take off. But I really think that one of the things we could look at is a dual track, both communities by topic and chapters by geography. There are other organizations that are successful in that. And I think I mentioned this too when we talked individually, John. PRSA is a really good example of that. They have incredibly strong, I believe they call them intersections, which is the same as our communities and chapters. Both are strong and thrive. And so I think that while that is a different topic and a different issue, organizationally, we can look to see what they do to see if that's something that could apply to us and help us. As a member of the ethics committee since 2010, I strongly believe was part of the group that updated the current code of ethics. And as are a couple of other people who are on this call today. And I think that it's critical for our organization. And as you start scheduling those meetings for the Strategic Planning Task Force, as I previously said to Matt and previously said to Victor, please let me know when they are, because I want to observe as well. This is very important to our organization.
Thank you, Lauren. Other board members? Matt Hall and then Yvette.
I want to echo what Lauren and Rebecca said. And first of all, thank you, Rebecca, for your emotional words. Appreciate them. And you. John, I think that presentation that you made was phenomenal. When you started with the baseball thing, I was like, where is this going? Here we go. Another kind of ethereal presentation that talks a lot and doesn't really drill down. And I think starting with that Venn diagram, it really helped crystallize things in a way that is super helpful for us. And I know how difficult it was for you as the executive director to come in midstream with a strategic task force that had been working and was only the latest iteration of many strategic task forces. So I think this gives us a really strong foundation, and I'm thankful for your efforts. There's 2 points I want to make out of it. One is I also think that communities is a smart way to go. It's how people journalism, right? It's how Slack groups happen and Facebook groups happen. So I think thinking of things topically and using the 2 communities that you seized on, freelance and international, is good models. I think are going forward is really smart because they are really successful, and it's because of the people in them and the connections that they've made that make those strong. So I think there's a lot for us to learn and emulate there. And I also really loved the idea of, I'm not want to get into the details because I think that's something, to Lauren's point, people will agree, disagree, we can talk those out. That's a good discussion. But I really love this notion that every year at the same time, an annual plan and an annual budget will come forward, and to have those work together is smart, because otherwise we're just throwing lines of figures on a spreadsheet without having a strategy behind it. So I think, I don't want to belabor the point, but I really appreciate the work you put into this and the work yet to do, because there is a lot of work yet to do, but this is a really good foundation for that. So thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Other folks? Yvette.
You're
Still
muted, Yvette.
Thank you. I was actually thanking you for this. I thought it was an excellent presentation. And as I said in the chat, when you early on in your presentation, that probably one of our biggest tasks and hardest tasks is the doing less of, right? And trying to figure that out. I think when you have an organization that has a lot of work to do and has a lot of fires to put out, we focus on putting out those fires instead of having a cohesive plan, a cohesive focus, So I think what you did really goes far to help us look at this is who we are. When we did that early survey of members, when the early strategic task force got together and had a survey, one of the questions was, what is SPJ to you? And no one really could say what that was, right? I really like, so the mission statement we have now is great, but I really like how you have drilled down and really consolidated into important points. I hope that your deck is made available. I certainly would like a copy. And I think that we have a lot to go on based on your work, so I appreciate that. I agree with quite a bit of it. I do think that, and again, we can talk about this at another time, but just as far as colleges, so yes, all in for the colleges, but and this is something that I'm focusing on now and having difficulty in my own chapter, college chapter. What happens afterward? The regional conferences get a lot of excitement among those young people. So I know we can't keep doing everything, but if we do have a way we're going, that is start early and get the college journalists excited about journalism and SPJ, then if we don't have the regional conferences, we need to think of something to keep their excitement growing and then to keep them in SPJ after they graduate. And so as we've talked about that already in this conversation. So that's the one thing I kind of have a question mark on if whether or not, we need the regional conferences for that matter. But anyway, excellent work. Thank you. And would love to have a copy of the deck.
Yeah, we can definitely make that happen. So I'm seeing a couple of notes here in the chat about communities. Those were good conversations to continue having. I think like others, the main point of friction is what we stop doing or what we do less of, right? That's what's difficult to define because we seem to like everything we're doing. We celebrate everything we're doing, but to put our focus on our decided on strategies, something has to give. And I think we have a lot to chew on here. Hey, Bob Shapiro, I see your note and we are getting to public comment very quickly here. So we'll be inviting people to weigh in. Other board members on John's presentation. So this will go back to Matt now to set up a meeting for us to move forward to take this. But John, I would ask you to share the whole slide deck with the board at this point. It lives on in the recording of this Zoom session. So if other members want to see it and talk about it, absolutely. But it'll be a guiding document as we move forward with the task force. So thanks very much. Lots and lots to think about there.
And thank you all for the feedback so far. I know more will come, but I appreciate it.
Okay. Sorry, get back to my agenda here. we are now actually at public comment. So this is the time in the agenda when we're going to ask for public comment. And if you would like to be recognized, either put into the chat field, raise your hand, or otherwise you can raise your hand physically, or you can raise your hand with the chat function. I saw Bob Shapiro first, and then I saw Hillary. So we'll go in that order to start. Bob.
Well, first I have to make sure my mic is working.
We can hear you, thanks.
Okay, John, looking at that presentation, had mixed, I support a great deal of it, but some of it I thought was a poison pill for us. And just listening to how chapters are discussed, I'm with NJSPJ, and the way we're referred to, even in pronouns, is extremely disturbing. So I don't think from the way a lot of you are talking, you know much about our chapter. We added 56 new members in February, just in time to not have any programs because of COVID. We now have about 140 members. Just earlier this month, we published a column, the lead op-ed in our state's largest newspaper, because we intervened when a reporter was arrested covering the protests. And this was a reporter for the Asbury Park Press, which is a very established newspaper. We've been dealing with the local issue of the changes in the open public records and open public meetings in New Jersey due to COVID, where basically they said, oh, we can do away with it when there's an emergency, and the law had no definition of an emergency. This led to two things. One program that we did and continue to do, partly with the New Jersey League of Municipalities, where we provide some of the technical expertise so that reporters can be part of open public meetings and that the public can be part of open public meetings. We've also started something, and I have to credit Miriam Ascarelli, that led to us signing a retainer agreement with a law firm, which is working completely pro bono, Jennifer Borg, who many of you may know. We now have a weekly program, 4 o'clock on Fridays, called Office Hours with Jennifer, where at first it was supposed to be answering questions about open public records and such. And it kind of became a weekly meeting for a lot of our members, not just our board members. So we're doing quite a bit despite COVID. There is one gigantic thing that we see as an obstacle to our work, and that is National SPJ. Because to a lot of our members and to almost all of our 56 new members, you guys don't exist. Now, part of that is due to COVID. Part of that is because there was no regional, because there is no conference in Washington. A lot of people from New Jersey might have gone to a conference in Washington. Nevertheless, we face the fact that next February, you guys are going to want $75 from our new members. Now, we got you guys to lower your dues to $50. We told a lot of people that we got special, we called it papal dispensation for this, and then we turned around and you were doing it for everybody. So be it, but it kind of made us retroactively look like we didn't know what was going on when that is the way it evolved. Secondly, we subsidized so that it became $20 to join SPJ. We found that is the price point where you can get lots of people. What you can also then do is provide services that people may be willing to pay for. But right now we see that calendar, we see February 2021, we see that SPJ circle as a wrecking ball that's going to hurt our growth and our membership here. And to see whatever survey you did, if chapters were so far down, then well, probably people in New Jersey didn't participate in that survey because we don't really think about National SPJ very often. But what do members care about? Location, location, location. maybe you wouldn't have weak chapters if the dues weren't so high, and they are very, very high. In New Jersey, we have other journalism organizations, the Center for Cooperative Media. Morris County just formed its organization. There's an organization that's very strong here in Montclair, where I live, and where seems half the National Press Corps lives. Not to mention investigative reporters, all of those organizations. If you think we're not that important, 140 times $75, give us our $10,000 back and we'll put it to good use. But I actually, John, I do agree with a lot of things in your PowerPoint. I really do. And I can see you put a lot of thought and effort into it. But I really cannot believe the way chapters were referenced even in passing.
Thank you, Bob. I don't think it was the intent of John to diminish the role of chapters. They've been the backbone of SPJ since our beginning. They are our calling card. They provide fellowship and structure to SPJ. But managing the chapter world is a challenge from headquarters, right? Because there's just a lot of moving parts. We make you guys jump through a lot of hoops. There's lots of rules. And yes, there's that daunting $75. So that's all good input, Bob. And I'm sorry you feel that headquarters is an impediment to any of your success. We want to be a partner with our chapters and help you guys achieve your goals. What are we doing at National? Well, a lot. I hope that your members are reading the weekly newsletter about all the services that are provided from National and availing yourselves of those. And I'd be happy to chat with you more one-on-one to see how we can have a better relationship between your chapter and headquarters, because we don't want you to feel alienated or otherwise abused by anything happening.
Well, I will give you one thing that's not specific to New Jersey regarding college chapters. We've tried to help colleges form chapters over the years, and SPJ's hoops are very daunting. And the only way a chapter really gets formed is if there's a faculty person who's dedicated to making it happen. Sometimes there's a student who's dedicated, but they graduate before it happens. So here's what we've been doing. We've been letting colleges join NJ Pro, or college students, and then effectively form their own chapter without jumping through the paperwork hoops. We don't interfere with them. Now, there's certain things they don't get because they're not recognized by National, but it hasn't really bothered them. And we also, rather than putting a lot of focus on colleges, in New Jersey, at Montclair State, right now there is so much available to a student in broadcast journalism, we can't begin to compete. However, the moment they graduate, all of that stuff disappears. And we've been concentrating on people immediately after they graduate, when they get into the real world and when all of their privileges as students disappear. And we found that to be very productive.
Thanks for all of that input. Appreciate it. I did see Hillary's hand next, and then Lauren.
Patty, can I just say something about what Bob just said that might be helpful to him?
All right.
Bob, just want you to know that there has been an effort to update and simplify the rules to make it easier to form college chapters. So I'd encourage you to follow up with your RC, and I'd be happy to be part of that conversation too, because we know one of the challenges was the relatively cumbersome rules that we had. And I'm glad that you brought up the postgrad, because there's the postgraduate rate that we would love everybody to take advantage of when they graduate. And thank you, Patty, and thank you, Hillary, for letting me speak before you.
Thank you. And to Hillary now.
Sure, no problem. Gosh, okay, so let's see. I echo the appreciation of John for that presentation. I thought that was a really great distillation of and sort of like reframing and bringing certain aspects of the organization and activities of the organization into focus. So I found that really helpful. And I especially liked the Macmillan Matrix. I've actually been talking with a couple people recently about doing for the freelance community sort of a comparative analysis or competitive analysis of our place. I feel like we've gained traction within the organization of being like understood and recognized within the organization. I feel like we still have a ways to go, but we have traction there, which is incredibly gratifying. And I feel like one of my next goals for the freelance community is to better establish our profile within the journalism landscape as a whole. And so I like the Macmillan Matrix as a framework for understanding how, like what we're offering, what our strengths are, how it lines up against what other folks are providing, and how we can prioritize strategically for that. I also want to echo thanks to Rebecca for your heartfelt comments, and more than that, for sticking it out for 39 years and continuing to do so. To you and the many, many others who have overcome totally unjust obstacles in order to continue to have a voice at the table. We are all better for it, and hopefully can do a better job of supporting you. So thank you for representing that. One just additional thought that I would like to add to consideration of how SPJ can stand out is in leadership training. And I think of that in two ways. One is leadership training for SPJ's volunteer leaders. I thought it was a real shame when SCRIP's leadership program was changed to, I can't remember exactly what it was changed to. I just remember realizing, oh no, I'm not eligible for that anymore. And other people like me who are getting involved with the organization, striving and pushing out of our comfort zone to take on leadership roles. I did this leadership training in Baltimore, it was in my early days of involvement with the freelance community. I found it really helpful. And I continue to draw on some of the insights that I gained in that session. And I think it would be really valuable to continue that for volunteers. Additionally, I think that a real deficit within the profession is leadership training for newsroom managers. I think that a lot of times skilled reporters get elevated to positions of management and don't have the professional support to learn how to effectively manage their staffs. I've had the good fortune of working with incredibly skilled and wonderful editors, and I've also not always had that good fortune. And a lot of my colleagues and I think have shared that experience. I've noticed it in my limited degree in my own career, and I've also definitely observed it in other newsrooms. So I think that that is something that SPJ would be doing adding great value to the profession by including that in the educational component of those sort of three big goals. And also it would be really critical to embed the diversity element and priority in that type of leadership training so that volunteer leaders within the organization have some guidance about the best way to encourage and foster really healthy diversity within the communities, within the chapters and so forth, and also so that newsroom managers, we can talk a lot in sessions about diversity in the newsroom, but I think it would be really helpful to complement that with some direct newsroom management training that also emphasizes diversity. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Lots of good ideas. I'll just say that the Scripps program, we're aware that that's a hole in our structure, that we need a way to train future leaders and bring people along. into leadership roles, but that the Scripps program had been remade, and the focus is diversity in collegiate newsrooms. I mean, that was, at least when we left it, it was going to be working with college level journalists at historically Black universities. Is that right, John? The last
Yeah, that
time.
was going to be a big focus, but also we got funding from the SPJ Foundation to bring back the original version of Scripps. It'll be called something different, but for that same focus and emphasis in 2021, we hope. COVID kind of made that disrupted, of course, but we're hoping to bring that back.
Okay, that's awesome. Sorry if I missed the memo on that.
No, that's
I mean,
all right.
it's still being developed, but they at least gave commitment to it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I'm seeing a lot of endorsement of your idea on newsroom management, both how do you be a good newsroom manager, how do you ensure diversity in newsrooms. So that's one of those ideas that's great, but to John's presentation, is that our wheelhouse? Is that our lane? Do we have the capacity to build that out? Should we partner with other groups that already do that and do it well? And then, you know, make that available, promote that to our members, et cetera. So all good ideas, but yeah, thank you very much for that. And Jonathan Make had his hand up.
Sure, thank you. I think I agree with what Hillary said. I would love to see more of that sort of training. I just wanted to say I hope they're not sacred cows when this effort continues and when it wraps up, even though some of the recommendations are, you know, contrary to my own kind of colloquial interests. I also think that if taking these steps, even some of the, you know, perhaps drastic ones involving less of an emphasis on the local chapters in the regions, if that's going to make SPJ a longer lived, more vital organization that is more helpful to the future of journalism, perhaps so be it. You know, I realize it's, you know, controversial for me to say that. I just think that we have to think strategically. I'm glad to see that we are. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, other hands. Going back and forth here. Other folks want to weigh in. Well, you will hear more on this. There's a lot of great ideas on the table. There's a lot to chew on in John's presentation. There's a lot of work ahead for the task force on this. But you're right, Jonathan, you know, there are sacred cows. There are traditions of SPJ that might be sidelined, and that won't make everybody happy. And so we're going to have to, if we're going to be successful and live another 111 years, we've got to figure out who we are, how we move forward, take advantage of the moment without being overwhelmed by it. All right, with that, unless I have anybody else who would like to speak at this time, we'll return to the agenda. And that is the committee reports. Rebecca had asked to go first because she has to get to the business of news gathering. And so we'll have you come on and speak about diversity committee efforts. I would like to say, as I said when we started today's meeting, that I was really buoyed by the great amount of energy being expended by our committees and our communities, the great work that you guys are doing on behalf of SPJ, in the name of SPJ. It's always just amazing to me how much people roll up their sleeves for this organization and do the work on the ground to improve your chapters, work with your members, advance journalism. So with that, turn it over to Rebecca first.
Thank you very much, Patty. First of all, many of you received my report, and although it was brief, I was planning to add more to it, but I am in one of the hot spots in Texas right now, and COVID, and about 400 people are infected every day. So I'm on top of that story, working for 2 community papers. So I have, you know, I'm juggling quite a few things, including a woman who disappeared from Fort Hood. No one has found her in 60 days. So with that said, let me tell you with the diversity committee. We've been having conversations, John, Patty, Matt and I are gonna talk, my committee. And one of the key things that I find out from today that I'm going to take back to the committee is definitely, we wanna know what the membership wants. Again, As I said before, 39 years, I've been waiting for these conversations to come forward. But I can't assume for the people who are not people of color, the people who are not gay, the people who don't have different religions who sometimes are harshly criticized. I cannot assume that I know what you guys want to talk to, which, you know, our membership is, I don't know the breakdown, John, you can probably tell me, but majority white. It's a very delicate situation too, because as many of my fellow white journalists have told me, I didn't know this. I don't want to be beaten over the head with it. I don't want to be criticized. I don't want to be looked at as a racist. So I have to take a lot into consideration. And it's something that my committee has talked about. My committee is mostly people of color. We have one white female. So some of the things that, and with the help of John and with the help of Patty, because, you know, they have said, you know, please, let's do this. So first of all, let me talk about the Diversity Fellowship. As you guys all know, I revamped it when Alex put me as her committee chair, and then Patty said, continue doing the work. Last year, we had a very successful program with very high profile speakers, one-on-one. We had the two main things were breakfast with the fellows and aha moments in the afternoon. And let me just say that, you know, we had, you know, everybody from NBC correspondents, Gabe Gutierrez, to Eleanor Vega, who at the time was running the CBS LA Bureau. And we just had great people. But one of the key points about the Diversity Fellowship that makes it very key is that finally these mostly people of color were able to meet movers and shakers, whether within SPJ or an RTDNA, everybody was there, right? Face to face. And we created a safe zone when we had these breakfasts. It was just, you know, a small group. Same thing with the aha moments. But as I discussed it with our committee and discussed it with Patty and John and also the SPJ Foundation, Erwin and Hagit, we can't do that via virtual. It's very hard to have the same impact that face-to-face does in a virtual Zoom kind of thing. So we've decided kind of to put it on hold. Hold. We're not getting rid of it because you know that's important to me and to my committee and SPJ. But put it on hold. But in the meantime, the beauty is, you know, John has been talking to Rod Hicks, and they had been talking about having different diverse panels at the conference we're going to have physically. But one of the things that I suggested to, and Patty and again, John and Erwin and Hagit, very open to it, is when we have these virtual conferences for 2 days, and again, it is very important that we do have all the other elements, you know, all the discussions about freelance, the discussions about the latest tools, ethics, that is key. I mean, you know, although I would love to have 2 days of just diversity inclusion, you know, our membership needs a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But I did say, you know what, let's hope we have at least 3 solid panels at the conference that our membership wants. I need the feedback from the membership. I can't assume that this Mexican woman knows it all. I don't know what your thought process is. So this is why our committee's waiting for that. And it's a good start today because I can see that many of you guys have ideas and that's important. So that is definitely one of the things. Another thing too that our committee wants to do, and again, it is about the parameters. What can we do? What can, you know, because I know that John and the staff, I mean, you ask Jennifer for help, boom, she helps us right away. John, boom, helps us right away. But at the same time, I don't want to step on, you know, who's doing what. But one of the things is, yes, and probably not to take away from the conference, but we do want to have Zoom, you know, conversations, different topics. There's been quite a few people who have said, Rebecca, what is Black Lives Matter? I mean, really, you know, and it's okay. No question is a dumb question. It's like someone recently asked me, okay, can you explain DACA to me? And this is a veteran journalist, and it's okay. You know, we're not going to judge. We're here as a diversity committee to say, okay, good, you asked me that question. Here's what it is. Let me write it out, pass it around your newsroom. But again, you know, I've been living this, you guys, for 39 years. I can't assume I know what you want to talk about. So we do want to have Zoom conversations, you know, certain topics. that can open the brains and the hearts of everybody. Another thing that we're doing is, yes, the diversity style guide was created by Rachel Knagle a few years ago. Now, from my research, it appears that the diversity committee had nothing to do with it. At the time, the president came in, I mean, not the president, the committee chair came in, I believe, and I'm not really sure, looked it over, said, and gave it the stamp of approval. But, we have gotten some concerns, emails, tweets about people who said, hey, update this book. Again, this was not part of our committee, but now that I knew that I heard the concerns and brought it to Patty, and Patty had heard about it and she was doing something about it too, so was John. That is being updated now. Now, Ms. Knagle, she's going to update it, and then our committee is going to come in and look at it to make sure that everything's in line. Again, we don't want to duplicate the work. She started it. She was partly funded by SPJ Foundation. And she said, I'll update it. Plus, she also wrote a book about it. So we leave that in her hands. One of the things the committee has started is, it's not a guidebook, it's what I call a conversation opener. How do I, if I have an all-white management team, how do I open up that conversation as a person of color? Or what other things as a person who's white in an all-white newsroom do to bring on more people? What's that conversation? It's very delicate, believe me, because every newsroom, and I worked in 7 newsrooms, you guys, TV newsrooms, no doubt I was labeled a troublemaker because I brought it up. But what if you're white and you bring it up? So this book will be more of a conversation opener. I really can't explain it. It's not a guidebook. It's how to open up the conversation in these areas. Zoom webinars, I'm looking at my notes, excuse me. And postpone.
While you're looking, I'm just going to insert one of the conversations that we had this week that Lou is highlighting in the chat field, is not just that we will be very cognizant about the population of all of our panels, of all of our events. We're not looking, that we want to make sure we have diversity within panels, no matter what the topic is, even if the conversation is not related specifically to diversity in newsrooms. Mm-hmm. So very cognizant of that.
Yes, Lou.
I guess I would ask you, Rebecca, as you go forward, if we're not going to have the Diversity Fellow program for some very good reasons, how can we make sure we keep that alive? How can we make sure we bring last year's Diversity Fellows into meaningful engagements with SPJ going forward in multiple ways? So, and I know you're thinking about all those things because we've had that conversation, but.
Yeah, definitely. But let's share it with everybody else. One of the key things is, one of the things that John's going to help us is, where are all the diversity fellows? Are they in the business? And it's something that I've talked about this with you guys before. I was one of the fellows, if you didn't know, back in 2010. I hate to say this, it was kind of a joke, because the person assigned to me said, you're going to teach me more about diversity than I can teach you. I thought, whoa, whoa, whoa. And so now we need to find those fellows. And I hope that most of them are still in journalism. The fellows from last year, obviously, they're all reporters from the Wall Street Journal. One has is a bureau chief in Havana. They're all busy because, fortunately, the people of color are being thrown into all these protests and pandemics because, Latinos and African Americans are being killed the most by the pandemic. But yeah, they're being involved as much as they can be. They do speak on different panels, even with other organizations, and make it very clear they're SPJ fellows. Some of them are on committees. I think Matt has one of our fellows working with him. I believe the membership committee may have one of ours. But again, what we're trying to do is also have them keep the conversations going. But there's so much more to do with the fellows. What do we do? First of all, we continue talking about the fellowship and what it brought to us. Last year, we were able to record some videos with the fellows about the advantages of being in this fellowship. But we do let people know that it has been put on pause. Not postponed, not canceled, but on pause. And, again, bringing these fellows together, I hope, and the committee's on this too, is that we do find all those fellows and see where they are now. And you know, I believe, I hope that this fellowship made an impact, whether they switch careers or not. But, you know, these are, you know, ideas. And again, I have to thank Patty and John and also Matt, because, you know, I'm very strong-willed in this area. And, you know, but I also know that I never want you guys to feel like I'm pounding you on the head with it, because I do hear that from my colleagues who are white. And it is a difficult time for some of you guys, I think. But on the other hand, it's a good wake-up moment. Because like I said before, you know, I've lived it with this my whole life. Any questions, anybody?
Thank you very much. Any questions for Rebecca? We have Yvette's hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Yvette. You have to
unmute.
Unmute.
Yep, I got it.
Okay.
Screens went. Okay. Hi, thanks so much for this. I really like the idea of the conversations, and let me just tell you why. You know this, but everyone else might enjoy hearing this. So there are many people, all different kinds of people, who are asking questions about why things are going on and what things mean. As you said, what's DACA, what's Black Lives Matter really, all these things. So many people who don't know about things, they turn to people who they think might know about it. So this might turn out to be people of color that they're asking, right? Or some people of color might be asking another community of color about something. What happens sometimes is there's a certain amount of fatigue that many people of color, communities of color, religion, anyone who might have to explain, there's a certain amount of fatigue that often happens. Many people, you know, some people, one expression that I've heard people refer to it as a tax, because we are taxed to explain why things are happening. I think the conversations would be excellent and would be great for people who want to be involved in the conversation, who are from a community of color or religion, but also for people who want to ask the questions and either don't know who to ask or don't want to tax their friends or people they may know. I think this is great. I think it would be a great way for people to come together to get answers to questions, and for people in newsrooms, for example, to not feel like I've got to answer this question again. I'm just so tired of this. There's a real fatigue going on, guys, among these communities of color and religious communities and ethnic communities of having to explain or answer the question. So I think the conversation is a really great idea.
So let me jump in real quick. Yvette, thank you because you just blew up something in my head. You're right. You know, I don't know how many times in newsrooms people will come to me, okay, Rebecca, again, why can't we say illegal aliens? And you know what, there's another, Yvette, you just reminded me that we need also to teach people of diverse backgrounds that sometimes we are automatically leaders. And don't be fatigued, because for me, it's always a compliment as a Latina when someone who's not Hispanic or, you know, whatever, comes to me and what's DACA? And why shouldn't we say illegal aliens? And I'm sorry, like the other day, I kept hearing the woman who's missing from Fort Hood. They believe, you know, she was kidnapped in, I don't know where. Her name is Vanessa Guillen. But I kept hearing anchors call her Gillen. And I thought, you know what? All it takes is one person, and many people would always come up to me in the newsroom and say, hey, how do you say this in Spanish? And I would spell it out for them phonetically. So what we have to define in some of these newsroom events, and you're right, there are people like me who I'm not fatigued. You come to me, I'm a brown woman, I'm a Latina, come with me with any questions, because I want you to get it right, because you're my colleague, because I'm a leader in that newsroom as a Latina. And so what we need to do is, and within this is, and you brought it up, whether we do it with SPJ or, you know, we have these other organizations, find the leaders within those people of color, whether, or religious, or, you know, LGBTQ. I mean, you know, ask the question. Someone said, hey, well, I thought LGBTQ was questioning, not queer. And I was like, well, I think it's both, you know, but again, I went to my people who are part of that community and they were able to tell me. But I think we also find leaders within within those groups to not, because there are Latinos like, what am I? You know, you're designated Hispanic and everything. I get it. Some people don't want it. But we find those people who are not fatigued, who can help the other people answer the question. So I appreciate, Yvette, that idea, because you're right. You know, some of us are tired of it. I never get tired of it, honestly. It's a compliment to me when someone comes up to me and says, Rebecca, how do you say this in Spanish? It's a compliment. But
well, you know, we've been talking about the importance of our college chapters and our young people. And maybe I should say that I'm seeing a lot of fatigue from young people. And perhaps that's because they haven't had the leadership training and they don't know how to handle it. And maybe there's not as much fatigue. No, I still say there's probably a lot of fatigue with adults. But young journalists, new journalists that have been in newsrooms for like just a couple of years, and people who are about to graduate, there's a lot of fatigue going on.
Right. And I think we find a way to empower them, to take this and show them this is an empowerment moment. In every newsroom, even though I dealt with issues, but I was always looked at as a leader, especially when it concerned like, okay, ask Rebecca about DACA, explain it. You know, and to me it's a compliment, but again, these young people, teach them leadership. Instead of looking at like, they're sick and tired of it, turn it around. Also for people, if you have an all-white newsroom, find the people in that newsroom who are open to, you know, let's say Matt's my boss and it's an all-white newsroom. And like, okay, Matt, who do I go to explain DACA? Well, you know, I have a list of people here, let's call so-and-so. Again, no question is a dumb question. You know, it isn't. You know, and again, my friend who had, you know, many Emmys under his belt, he didn't really understand DACA. You know, he's like, okay, Rebecca, break it down for me. And you would assume he would know everything, but you don't. I don't know everything. I don't. So Yvette, great suggestion. I'm going to write that one down and definitely talk about it with the committee. We find leaders within leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for the input. This is really helpful to help us frame how to put together a conference conversation. Maybe it's about fatigue and fighting the fatigue of the conversation to keep it going and make meaningful change in newsrooms. Let's move on to the Awards and Honors Committee. Sue, are you on the line? Not sure Sue is on the line. So if you read it, that committee carries a lot of water for SPJ. Mark of Excellence, helps with SDX awards, a lot of the individual awards, which we are taking up later today. And so
maybe Andy could address it. He's the vice chair.
Sure. Here. Yeah, thanks. I'm leading to a question here with my preamble. So first of all, I want to say thanks to the committee for really exceptional work. Brand new contest this year that recognized college coronavirus coverage, very successful. And so my main question, and Andy, you can address this, is whether we are asking that committee to do too much, whether that committee some tasks should be taken out of that committee. And probably the bigger question is whether we do too many awards overall. You can see. So Andy, would you like to pipe in?
Yes, sure. Actually, it's kind of the opposite. We have added more to the committee this year in a way that I think is helpful. We restructured, because the executive committee went away, we restructured how the process works, and the awards committee took on 3 of those types of awards. I think it's actually appropriate for them to go before the awards committee. This year we've had a lot of energy with both the CCC awards, which were fantastic, with some ideas for promoting our existing contests with the MOE, turning that into an SDX function. We are working on additional categories for next year for COVID coverage, so that doesn't get lost. We're thinking about what types of racial coverage issues that might be separated out, maybe as a wildcard category, so that isn't lost. I think the committee has really been as active and vibrant as it has been in a while this year. I'm not against having awards added. This year, I think it was important. Some of the awards that we added, fact checking was a new category. 360 video was a new category. We're starting to get into things that are more appropriate for our times that we may have been a little behind on. The rule of thumb in the past was don't keep adding, make sure that you pull back. So we are cognizant of looking at things that may not be as important anymore or that we combine, but I think the new additions are good and useful.
I raised that just want to make sure we're not burning out our volunteers and overburdening you. And, you know, using the SDX Awards as an example, it was a fabulous show yesterday, by the way. If you didn't catch it, it's on YouTube. You can go back and watch. Very well done. But there are so many awards, and does that dilute the power of the awards, right? The Pulitzers, for example, are selective. They give their 17 or 18 awards, and that's it. And so as you guys go forward, you know, I really like the thinking that as you add, then let's see what we should take off the list that maybe is not as relevant to recognize anymore, or has gotten a little stale, or doesn't generate many entries, etc.
Sure.
Okay. Other questions for Andy?
I just want to jump in here real quick. I didn't catch the awards program live as it was happening, but it was superb. I mean, it was such a great production. I just want to tell you that. I mean, it was excellent. And, you know, the whole thing from beginning to end. So thank you so much.
Thank you. See, we still can do SPJ in lockdown. So that gives us great hope for the non-EIJ conference. Next, we have the ethics report. Is there anybody from the committee on the line that would like to comment? And are there questions? I see Lauren's hand.
Andy and I are here. We can answer any questions, but we don't have anything to add beyond what's in the report. Okay,
very good. I see a suggestion in the report that perhaps I have not focused on enough, and that's the idea of better promotion of our hotline. We have this ethics hotline, and the report tells us that it's often used, and people are very appreciative when they can call and get a live person on the line to talk to. So I'll do a follow-up conversation with John about that. Who primarily, either Lauren or Andy, staffs those calls when a call comes in?
I can take that, Lauren.
Yes.
So the process is that, and you know, Andrew will know this too, that the calls come in through headquarters, and at one point there was some discussion, maybe it should just go directly to ethics committee members. I think that headquarters wanted to be able to track it, mostly as a way that people aren't contacting somebody and never hearing about it, that, you know, it's at least tracked, and then, you know, did they get a response? But as far as I know, a lot of it goes to Lynn right now. I don't know if any other members of the committee are taking calls, although I did take one the other day because people were busy. But I'm going to guess that Lynn is handling most of them. I'm just not sure of that.
Okay. Because if we are going to start to promote it more and we get a flood of new calls, we've got to manage that so not one person has to handle all of it.
Yeah, so I would suggest a conversation with Lynn before doing that for that very capacity reason.
Right. And you saw in the memo that Ethics Week will happen in the fall. And so we'll keep everybody apprised how that rolls out. Thank you very much. Freedom of Information Committee, that is Paul Fletcher. I don't think Paul is on the call. Are there any comments or questions about the FOI committee report? I would just commend the committee for raising the PIO issue to a higher level. That's gotten a lot of national attention and conversation that I don't think really existed much before this year. That's largely because of Catherine Foxhall and her continued work on that. And I would direct everybody to the list of advocacy work that's happening in each of our regions. Lots of activities, and again, kind of capturing what everybody's doing out there in the SPJ world and making it available or known to other persons is always a challenge. So I appreciate that Paul took time to collate those into one memo, because it really does, it's really impressive, actually. Bob Becker.
Yeah, the one thing that isn't in there that I wish would be, and perhaps going forward should be, a lot of jurisdictions claiming COVID-19 have stopped responding to FOIA requests. The District of Columbia said, we're not going to respond till after the pandemic is over, till after the emergency is over. So most people just get this response, we're not going to respond until we decide we're going to. And that's a major problem. It's not unique to the district. It's going on all over the country. And I think that SPJ needs to be very vocal on that.
Thank you. Good suggestion. I'll follow up with Paul on that. Super. Let's see. Next, moving on to our Journalism Education Committee. Anybody from the committee on the call? Again, a shout out to the committee that really ramped up in COVID and transformed into virtual offerings. According to the report, they've had 667 presentations, meaning the virtual edifications of training have been used 667 times since some date. I don't know what the start of that was, but that's pretty impressive use of our resources out there. So thank you to all the people involved in that effort.
Yeah, and, Patty, I can just really speak to that quickly. It also shows just what you can do in lockdown, as you have said. A lot of the videos created were with Zoom or some kind of a Skype software. They were conversations with reporters on how they were covering the pandemic or doing their jobs during the pandemic. So just using a little ingenuity and some forethought, it really turned out to be a good thing, and people are using the videos.
It's great to hear. I know I've downloaded several to use this fall in my classes to cut my prep time. All right, next, LDF. The memo shows 36 cases since this time last year, actually said September of last year. That seems low. I'm wondering, let's see, I'm wondering if that was an old memo that was submitted, but nonetheless, one point that should be made and we've made before is that we do a lot of work under the umbrella of LDF, and we don't do a great job of tooting our own horn about it. And, I think John's presentation about strategy highlights that this is a need and we do it well. And we should continue to promote the fact that we have a legal defense fund and we do legal defense work for the world of journalism. And so thank you to our lawyers and to Hagit Lamore, who continues to lead that committee. And I would like us to find ways to give that a higher profile among all the things we do. Next, we have...
I want to add 9. We probably should add 9 to that number.
There
were some addition. Actually, no, even more than that.
I think so too. I think 36 was an old number.
15, about 15. That's an old number. That was since the April report. Since that April report, there's been probably another 15.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren.
As the liaison to the RCs, we meet before each of our national board meetings. And this issue came up in the meeting that we had this week, so I just wanted to share it more broadly. I know, Patty, I've shared it with you, which is every time we support someone and give them money, it would be really helpful if perhaps somebody at headquarters could reach out to the RC in the area so the region and the local chapter can promote it. There have been instances when chapters have been asked about this and they didn't even know an award was given. And this is, I guess, what you would call low-hanging fruit, pretty easy to rectify with just one quick email. And I think that, could help us with that promotion a lot. So on behalf of the RCs, I wanted to share that.
Thank you. And I know you've shared that before, so noted. And that segues nicely into membership. Among the suggestions coming out of the membership committee is that we consider doing LDF testimonials. So if you got $5,000 from SPJ, let's just get a 2-minute thank you very much kind of testimonial that we can use in various ways. And that's a good suggestion. So membership committee, I know that Colin is out of town, but the report is there and I participated. I sat in a call with some other folks this week, new subcommittee on student membership. And I think the takeaway there is we know that students are an important part of our future and that we need to do better in finding them, onboarding them, supporting them, making their membership easier, right? fewer hoops to jump through and all that good stuff. And I think John made the best comment of the meeting, which is advisors are the glue, right? You got to find the good advisor. You got to nurture those advisor relationships because they're the ones who have continuity on campuses. You get a strong advisor, you get a strong campus chapter. So lots of activity there. Moving to the nominations committee. It's in your packet or in the, not the packet, what are we calling that? The Dropbox, sorry. You see we have a paucity of candidates. We need more candidates. And so I call on everyone on this call to reach out to people in their SPJ networks and help us build a more robust slate of candidates, right? We have holes at some offices. We have no competition at this moment. There is no competition. So we can do better and we should do better, right? We're talking about all these various priorities that we have. One is diversity. Let's bring in more candidates who are not white people. Can we try to do that? Right? Can I see some nods? Yes. Can we try to do that? I think that's important.
Of course.
At this moment, most of all, that's important. So I know I have reached out to a number of people and some are like, thank you very much, not ready yet. That's okay, right? Keep track of those people, have those conversations. I'm sure Matt would appreciate having a robust election. And so let's do what we can to continue to beat the drum and bring in more folks. Okay. Regional coordinators, we had a report from Jane. Jane, are you on the call? Saw your name earlier.
Yes, I am. I don't really have anything to add. I thank you, Lauren, for bringing up what we discussed about the LDF. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer.
I do have a question. All of the regionals were canceled. Region 3 always has a fall conference, so they're not officially canceled. But I just wonder if it's probably too late in the calendar to reconsider. Did any of the regions consider doing a virtual conference? And if so, did they reject that? And that would be good learning for the board to know if regions thought about doing virtual and decided, no, not worth it.
Yeah, a couple of the regions did talk about doing a virtual. It just seemed like a huge undertaking for, you know, a small group of people trying to plan it, because it was kind of it was too close to the time when most of the regionals were scheduled when we did cancel. I think if there had been another month or so, probably a few of them would have done it. Some of my regions are jumping in to have, you know, an enormous, great conference next year because they're joining forces. The people who are planning for this year are joining forces with the people who are going to plan for 2021. So I'm interested to see if that makes a bigger and more popular regional. Certainly in Region 1, PCLI and Connecticut are pretty much joining forces, and they're two very strong chapters. So I'm interested in seeing how well that's going to work. And if maybe the idea of an annual regional isn't always what we want to do. So there could be benefits coming out of this. Region 10 had talked about doing a regional in October, but they're really worried about the second wave now. So I don't think that's gonna happen. It's just too iffy. And I saw Michael was on the call. I don't know, Region 3 still planning on doing what they were going to do. But.
Well, and something else, Patty, that the RC's talked about was for planning for next year is to have a backup plan to have a virtual conference in case that's necessary. So I think to the point Jane made about the runway, there was just so little time when COVID hit that it wasn't possible for the regions to do it. But now with the amount of time that they have to plan for next year, I think that and I know that there's several RCs here in the meeting. I think the consensus was that most of them are planning to have backup plans for virtual.
That sounds
Yes,
great.
we did talk about that. I mean, in Region 1, for example, the conference was planned for March 21st, so they didn't have much time at all. Even though I told Long Island never to plan for a conference before April 1st, because the last time they did, they got 16 inches of snow, and this time they got a pandemic. So if you want to blame anybody for the pandemic, please blame PCLI. But no, there just wasn't time. But I think we'll all have backup plans.
That sounds prudent. I did attend my region here, Region 4, did a very nice job of doing a virtual awards program.
Right.
I'm sorry, I said Region 4, I meant the Cincinnati chapter. So I do hope that chapters are continuing to meet. It would be good, I think, through the regional coordinators to get a sense of the activity level of chapters. Are many going to virtual meetings? How are they staying in touch with their members? I don't know if that information is coming into headquarters. My sense is no, that we really maybe don't know that much about what the level of chapter activity, right? We don't ask for, we ask only for an annual chapter report. We ask for the committees to weigh in, but maybe one piece we need to build out is periodic chapter updates, so we know if a chapter has not done anything for 4 months, 6 months, that we can intervene more than once a year. I don't know. That's starting a whole new conversation that maybe we're not ready for at this moment, but
I can talk to the regional coordinators and see how each of them feel about that. I'll definitely.
Yeah. You know, one of the main reasons that we removed the regional coordinators from the board was to allow them to put their SPJ efforts into building the regions, building the chapters, staying in touch with the chapters. So that might be something we need to add to their list of tasks, is let's have better, more regular kind of reporting out from the chapters so we know what's going on at the chapter level. Right, okay.
That sounds good, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Andy, you got your hand up?
Yeah, just on a couple of things. In Region 2, the regional conference was piggybacking on the Press Association having their annual awards, and that was in May. When that fell apart, it fell apart for both of them. There really wasn't a chance to do anything virtual. I can also say for the SPJ DC chapter, it has been doing several virtual events, including the awards, which were moved online. That was well done. And as far as what the chapters are doing, that is supposed to be a function of the RCs. They're supposed to be in touch with them regularly, not just at annual report time, but throughout the year. So I think that there really is that task for them right now. I don't think it needs to be added.
Well, I think they are, but I can, you know, sometimes you have to light a match, Andy. I also want to say, we're talking about individual chapters, New England chapter has been doing some really excellent virtual meetings. They basically pick up the phone and call anybody they can think of to call, and got Seymour Hirsch, and would have gotten Gay Talese if he knew how to use Zoom. So I was he's 88. I mean, come on, give the man a break. But you know, they just took having to do things virtual and ran with it. I'm very proud of them. I think they set an example for other chapters.
Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate that. Moving now to the international community, which has been active, and you have a report from them. And let's see, do we have Elle still on the phone?
I'm here.
Hi, welcome.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you. So what would you like to add or highlight from your committee's report?
Well, I think the report kind of does a thorough list of all the things that we've been doing this year. So I'm open to answering any questions that anyone may have.
What's the size of the community at this point?
So the size of the community in our Facebook group, we have just a little over 400 people in the group. We've decided this year, there's a lot of people that have reached out that are not a part of Facebook. So we started our listserv. that's been a little bit of a task, but that's been growing from about 300 so far. And that's from our talks that we've been doing. We've been gaining traction with that. So people have been joining our listserv. And we have the task of getting the folks in our Facebook group into our listserv as well. So that's going to take a little bit of time. So those are the rough numbers, soft numbers, I would call it.
Yeah, those are great numbers. And nobody has to join if they don't want to, and there's no paperwork. They just hop on, right?
Right, to the Facebook group. And then we want to make sure we're including everyone with the listserv and doing the emails and not alienating anyone that wants to join.
Very good. And so if you read the memo, the group is doing regular webinars. You had 10 scheduled, is that right, Elle?
Yes, so we plan on doing this every Tuesday, and as long as people are requesting to connect with journalists from around the world and to be able to ask them questions directly, creating that one-on-one experience. And we have our July filled, and we're looking at August speakers, and we're going to continue it as long as there's a need. We've been getting great feedback.
What 100-person limit?
Yes. So one thing we want to really do is to have an intimate environment, and we are providing links to unlisted YouTube to the conversations after the fact, so that people can look at it afterwards. Our main thing is we wanted to, for those that wanted to connect to these journalists and ask them questions and kind of talk to them about relevant issues right now, that are timely issues right now, that they can do that in person or via Zoom. But it's been a great experience so far. It's been growing, and we're getting our ebb and flow with it. So I think people within the community have been really enjoying connecting with them and having access to them in that sense. So,
well, I've sat in 2 of them. The Maria Ressa conversation was particularly fascinating, and that's an example of a lot. I think that checks a lot of boxes for us, right? It's international, it's diverse. She's a woman. She's one of our fellows, right? So there's a lot of benefits to that particular program. I'm happy to know that they're available on YouTube. I think this is a really a strong member service. And Hazel, you're on the line. I'm sorry, Hillary. I sometimes get you, I think Hazel's the chair of the committee. Hillary is the chair of the freelance committee, and we did not get a memo from you, I don't think, but can we put you on the spot and get a summary of recent activities?
Sure. So the most recent activity was, and the reason that I did not, one reason that I did not submit a memo is because I was working on the proposal for establishing a press badge or photo ID program that would be available to freelancers through SPJ. We have initiated some conversations also with the membership committee. Ginny McCabe from Cincinnati is our membership coordinator for the freelance community. And Ginny and Colin DeVries from the membership committee and I had a really good 3-way recently to just talk about some more dedicated and strategic efforts that we could undertake to support the membership initiatives through and within the freelance community. And by that, I mean partly like getting a better handle on who is actually a member of the freelance community, because it's pretty nebulous right now. Also providing a more clear outline of what are the benefits specific to freelancers for becoming a member of SPJ. Our Facebook group has, Hazel, help me out. This is why people think Hazel's chair sometimes. But our Facebook group has just shy of a gazillion members, what, a few thousand?
Almost 1,900.
Okay. And our Twitter feed is very strong. Most of our engagement currently happens within the Facebook group, and actually Elle and Dan Kabisky, who also helps run the international community, The three of us are going to be having a three-way to sort of compare notes as community leaders about best practices and ways that we can support one another. And so that has always, I think that the strength of our freelance community group on Facebook is a very big strength, and I'm psyched about it. It's a relevant, useful, timely forum for conversations about freelancing. And it's also, knock on wood, with very few exceptions, a really supportive and compassionate, empathetic environment, which is a pretty great little oasis of, you know, snark-free zone on the internet. So I think that that's a huge strength, but I would like definitely to make more opportunities for engagement available to people who are not on Facebook. So that's part of it. We've also been collectively drafting and discussing as a board, issuing a statement, a Black Lives Matter statement. So that is something that we'll be discussing again at our board meeting on Monday. Just like a really explicit statement of support for journalists of color coming from the leaders of the freelance community. So there's that. We I think that we are needing to ramp up or revamp or re-energize some of our dormant initiatives like the newsletter and the Independent Journalist blog. And that those would both be components of creating the non-Facebook opportunities for engagement and outreach and just correspondence with members. And I am hopeful that that type of engagement will also help lead to more board recruitment and volunteer activity and engagement from within the membership. So that's not a comprehensive list by any means, but those are, I guess, what is high on my list.
Thanks very much. That's great, and leads us to our last two regular agenda items. We have proposals. The first one came from Colin DeVries on behalf of a number of folks asking for a forum to talk with SPJ staff about our new Impexium database. And I know that Colin is not on the call, and I believe everybody has read it. Board members, any questions about that request? Go ahead, Lauren.
I just want to say that I am supportive of it, and I'm supportive of it in a very broad way, not just the people whose names were on the memo requesting the forum, but I know I've said in some previous meetings, I've been involved as a professional member since 1996, and there have been database problems since that time. So if there's anybody who is currently on a chapter board, or in my case, you know, I'm an unaffiliated member, anybody who wants to share thoughts or opinions, I think if HQ can schedule a meeting just to give people an opportunity to be heard, that I think that that's a positive thing. I understand that we're on track, and I understand that there's a lot of experience, at least with a couple of staffers on this, but just for people to be able to be heard and so they know that John and the team are on it, I think is very valuable.
So I think it would be appropriate to ask John for a short update on where we are in the implementation of Impexium, and then let you react to the idea of a forum of some type.
Well, first, always open to a forum so that we can easily put that together, and will. The Impexium's moving great. We have one staff lead that sort of serves as the day-to-day connection, but all staff members, almost all, have participated at this point in discovery sessions in order to delineate what is the functionality and how does it apply to the various things we do. For instance, awards, how do we embed our awards selection process right into the system and things like that, for example. So it's turning out, from Caroline's reports, it's turning out to be the right choice so far for us. It's giving us a lot of the things we wanted and expected to have. Right now, we're on track to have it internally go live for review sometime in October and externally go live hopefully by November 1. That always, you never know what can happen in the midst of that. But one of the reasons we are doing that is because September is kind of a busy time for flow in of data to the organization, or has been traditionally. So we didn't want to transition during that kind of a time. It gets a little slower in October, November. So, but all's going well.
Very good. So we'll expect to hear from you then on when you can make that happen, and we'll publicize it. And any member who wants to sit in that conversation probably want to make it an after hours, like an early evening kind of webinar situation, interactive, etc. Okay. All right. And then we're moving to our next, any other comments, questions on that proposal? Hillary.
Thank you. I think that underlying my interest in signing on to that letter is what I would offer as a suggestion for a bit of a paradigm shift to actually view the volunteer leaders who run chapters, who run committees, who run communities, to actually view us also as users of the system. And even though we might not be the ones who will have our hands on it and who are writing the queries for it, I think that there's a lot of functionality that could enhance our ability to provide services to members and to support our members and to fulfill our job and responsibilities to SPJ. I just felt, I have felt a little ignored in the conversation about the database, because at the board meeting at EIJ in San Antonio last year, I think there are a couple of us, from my recollection, specifically brought up our interest in participating in the discussions and making our needs known. And to my knowledge, we have not been contacted since then. So I appreciate that the staff members probably have a really, solid, of course, have a solid handle on what the operational needs are within HQ. And probably many of the staff members have a pretty good idea of what the operational needs are for chapter leaders and for community leaders and so forth. However, to not ask us in the early design process seems like an oversight, and I would request not just to, in addition to having, the forum, I would also request consideration of a real paradigm shift to view us as users of the program as well.
Thank you very much. Good input.
Thanks.
Thanks. And now we'll move, unless I see another question, another hand, we'll move to the next, which is also Hillary. So this is a proposal. Sorry, that's a different question. Bob, we only have so much time here. It's a good question. Hillary has proposed, work with other folks to put together a proposal for press badges for freelance journalists who otherwise have news or are either chasing news assignments or have assignments for which they don't have adequate credentials or access, right? So everybody has seen it, I hope. And let's just do 2 minutes, Hillary, setting that up, and then we'll take questions.
Okay, sure, thanks. So, yep, the proposal as submitted requests consideration of offering a press badge as a new benefit that is available to SPJ members. I think that it would be valuable to freelancers, as well as in the informal survey that we put out, we got feedback from staff members from smaller outlets who expressed that they would find something like this helpful as well. And I appreciate that Bob Shapiro from the New Jersey chapter, after this was published in the board packet, I appreciate that Bob got in touch with me to share some concerns about how the proposal as written would affect some efforts that they have invested a lot of time in and laid a lot of groundwork for in New Jersey. So Bob and I had a great conversation this morning, actually, and I thought that Bob and his colleagues at the New Jersey chapter put forward, they actually prepared a letter with some alternative options and suggestions that they would be more comfortable with. And when Bob and I talked through everything today, we found some common ground. So I could just highlight that briefly, if I can navigate to the right window on my computer. So here are some proposed amendments to the proposal as it was submitted. So instead of calling it a press badge, to actually just sort of limit the mission of this and limit its scope to being an enhanced membership card. It would be a photo-based photo ID card, an enhanced membership card, instead of calling it a press badge. I think that avoids some tricky territory, yet still will, as I'll lay out, would accomplish most of what most of the respondents are seeking in a ID card like this. So we would like it to still include a photograph of the SPJ member and include the SPJ logo for sure. If that person is also a member of their local chapter, it would be great to have the local chapter's logo included on the card as well. Also, we had suggested requiring that the person applying for this card would certify that they will uphold the code of ethics, and in order to sidestep some of that tricky territory, and Bob and I hammered out an agreement to just require certification that the member has read the code of ethics, but not necessarily requires that they certify to follow it. Also, the major concession that I gave, you're welcome, Bob, was to not ask for the card to say the word press in like giant letters. Again, to limit the scope of it to a member ID card and not sort of like make it effectively a press badge, but call it a member ID card. Just keep the word press off of it and not include terminology that attempts to identify the card holder as a working journalist. And again, that sidesteps some tricky territory, and it also would not undermine other efforts, whether at the chapter level or otherwise, to establish separate press badges. One suggestion that I thought was great, so thank you for that, Bob, is to, on the back of the card, provide the phone number for headquarters so that someone could call to verify the person's membership. Granted, that would only apply during business hours, but I still think that would be a good idea. Also, one of the proposals, well, I guess that's, I'll limit that. Bob also had some other ideas about additional supports that might be able to be implemented, but those are the actual changes to the proposal that I had submitted.
So my first question, Hillary, is whether you think this modified proposal would in fact do the job that you want it to do, allow freelancers smoother access when they're on assignment.
I do. I don't think it's a perfect solution. I don't think there is a perfect solution. I think that this satisfies my take on it, having read through all of the responses and really spending a lot of time with the responses to try to figure out what it would be the best way to shape something to satisfy folks. My thinking is that it would satisfy most of their needs for most of the people who responded favorably to the survey.
Okay.
And I feel satisfied enough with that because it also feels actionable. And if we are to scale back and avoid some of the landmines, then it feels actionable. And like, I would be really psyched to give some material support to freelancers as well as other, staff members who don't have access to press badges without turning this into an indefinite conversation that could veer down many rabbit holes over the months ahead.
Any other specific questions for Hillary?
What about rapid response?
So that is separate from the press. That's okay. Do you want to actually? So I support Bob's proposal to establish a national rapid response program along the lines of what they have been operating in New Jersey for, I think, several years now. And he described it to me, but I can get out of the way now and have Bob describe that proposal, which I would wholeheartedly support.
I don't want to cut off conversation, but we are getting late in the hour and I haven't seen Bob's proposal. I haven't seen that, so I don't even know what that means.
Okay.
I only learned about this when I spoke with John Schertzer the other day, and so we had a lot of discussion in New Jersey and got that proposal out this morning. So I don't blame you for having not read it yet.
Right.
But I would hope that it does get read, and we can talk about communication issues some other time.
Thanks, Bob. I feel as though this is a conversation that needs to continue, and rather than us acting on it at this moment, and I hate to kick things down the road because it's important right now. I understand there's a very urgent need for freelancers to get assistance, but I wonder if I can suggest that Hillary, Bob, and somebody from headquarters and I have a conversation on how to move forward. I'd like to read your response in full, Bob. I didn't have a chance to do that.
Well, as you say, it is for freelancers urgent now during the protests. So Hillary has mentioned I've mentioned the rapid response she has. Let me spend 90 seconds to tell you what it is.
Okay, please go ahead.
In New Jersey, when a reporter is arrested, when a reporter contacts us and says, you know, I went to cover the town council and they just went into executive session and went into another room when they're basically not being credentialed, we react right away as soon as we learn about it. And it's very easy to do because all we do is inquire. We make a phone call or we send an email right away saying, why was this person denied this credential? We have not vouched for the person. We've not said this person is working press. We haven't said anything, but we have established that, you know what? This person's not alone. Other people are watching. Your decision to deny this person credentials is going to get scrutiny tomorrow from other journalists. And frankly, this is something that SPJ could do Monday morning. You have a paid staff, we don't. And someone should be able to call and say, you know what, the Asbury Park is having a huge protest tonight, and they've already said that media doesn't have to observe the curfew, but they said we're not media. So someone at SPJ headquarters immediately contacts whoever denied the credential and just says, why? Why was this denial made? That's all.
All right,
there's no liability,
right?
You know.
Thank you for that. And Lauren Bartlett, question or comment?
I think I would like to see us move forward with Patty's suggestion, but I also would like to get the advice of legal counsel, and then we can do a short single topic Zoom meeting for the board to discuss and vote on it. But I think that we need a little bit more information than we have right now, Hillary and Bob. I think we can move very quickly, but I think that Patty needs to get that additional information, and this has to go by our attorneys.
And I would additionally say that adding another item to the list at headquarters, I mean, we need to always be selective about that. What are we actually talking about? The logistics of making this happen. There are several working parts. And so we want to make sure that that's the way we want to go. It's a great cause, I support the cause if we can work out the logistics. So yes, a follow-up call, Hillary, Bob, John, myself, And then we'll bring it back to the board if that's the wishes of the board. Matt first, and then Rebecca.
Yeah, I just had a logistical question. If we're not calling this a press badge, this is a huge issue in San Diego. It's been an issue in other cities. It obviously is problematic for some reasons. I understand the total need, Hillary, that you're talking about, and the urgency. But my question is simple. It's right now, members get an ID card. It just doesn't have your photo on it. So if all you're asking for is an ID card with a photo, my question for staff, I don't need an answer today, but at the subsequent meeting is, what would be involved in logistics of that? Is it just someone sending you a JPEG of a high-res photo to put on a card? But what's the cost and the time involved in that?
Okay. We've investigated all of those things in New Jersey, and we'd be happy to share the information we've gathered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And Rebecca, did you have something to add? Then Hazel.
Yes. First of all, I'm a freelancer, been a freelancer for 10 years, and all these suggestions are excellent. Bob, Hillary, thank you. I don't know how many times I've arrived, and understand I'm very well known in Dallas, but there have been times where I've arrived at a scene and like, hold on, I'm like, I'm the media. And I literally have to pull up my LinkedIn to show them, because maybe it's new cops and they don't know who I am, or maybe when I was on TV here, they didn't watch my channel. But yeah, some kind of ID would be great. I literally, guys, have to look, this is my LinkedIn. I'm for real. And in some cases, there's been other reporters like, yeah, she's in the press, let her in. Another thing too, the rapid is great, because I've never gotten into problems as a freelancer, but man, it would really help to know that, you know, I can call and say, hey, Bob, I'm getting shit from these people here. I need some help, because I'm already in the chaos, in the middle of it. I mean, as a reporter, you know, you're in the middle of the chaos. To know somebody has your back somewhere, somehow, is great. So I know, you know, many of you guys on the board may not be freelancers, maybe not be reporters, but
Oops, you froze, Rebecca.
You froze for a sec. Thank you, Rebecca. You're frozen, so I'm going to go to Hazel next, and then let's see if we can wrap this up, friends. Hazel?
Okay, some of you may not know that this issue came up because an SPJ member by the name of Haston Willis, who lives in Atlanta, was detained. It turns out he wasn't arrested, but they took his phone away immediately, and he would not have, you know, they wouldn't let him show the credential that he was sent in email from his editor at the Washington Post, for whom he was freelancing at the time. It's more of an issue right now than it used to be before the pandemic, because so many journalists are freelancing now. So many people, or you know, go back 2 years and look at the number of people who are freelancing because their jobs have disappeared. I would hope that this committee would find a way to act on this in a reasonable way before the next board meeting, because there's a need for this right now.
Very good. We will. We will follow up. Andy, anything new to add?
Yes, two things. One is that when Bob talks about the idea of somebody at headquarters being available to step in if there's some type of problem, that is exactly what part of the job description was for journalist on call. Erwin's on the call, or John is on the call. Maybe they'd want to comment on that idea. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that I had some concerns about the proposal as it was raised because of how the SPJ Code of Ethics was presented. We are very mindful and try to be very careful about any attempt to use the Code of Ethics as some type of litmus test or regulation or anything like that. So I was very concerned about how it was presented. I'm a little less concerned now, but I would actually encourage not using the Code of Ethics at all, because if you tie it together with I'm a journalist because of the Code of Ethics, it's going to be misused. And I'd rather we stay away from that.
See our memo and you'll see.
We'll revisit that in the follow-up conversation. We'll try to make that happen very soon this week, if possible, if everybody has the bandwidth for that, and get back to the board in full with perhaps a a tighter proposal action plan. Okay. Very good. Thank you, everybody, for great input all meeting long. This ends the public part of our meeting. We are now going to be moving into executive session. And I would now take a motion for that purpose.
So moved. I move that we enter executive session to discuss the matters on the agenda listed for executive session.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So we have Lauren as the motion, Mike Riley as the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? All right. With that, John is going to stay with us, and we'll ask our other friends to leave. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob Becker. Thank you, Cecilia, Eleanor, other folks who are still on, just waiting for them to exit. Don Myers, nice to have you on with us. Eleanor, thank you for signing off. Cecilia Wexler. All right. And Bob Shapiro, are you still there, or is that a frozen screen? He may have walked away from a screen or something. I just muted his video. Bob Shapiro, are you still on? John, do you have any ability to remove Bob Shapiro? There we go. Okay.
I just put him in the waiting room. That's the best I could do, but
That's great.
Hopefully that'll mean he gets himself out of there. So.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for a productive discussion. I wonder if I could ask for 5 minutes grace to just use,
Great
that.
idea.
Thank you. Refill my beverage and use the restroom. Thanks. Be back in 5. Thanks.
And stop the recording, John.
So we are back on the record at 4:25 and completed our executive session. We are bringing no votes to the floor at this time, but we thank everybody who was able to participate today, and onward to our virtual fall conference. Thanks very much.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes. Is there a motion to adjourn? Lauren?
Second, Riley.
Mike Riley as the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, we're out. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
You guys.
Everybody,
Bye.
thanks.
Bye-bye.